I go into my meeting with David Poyle, and that my second year, I think I was third or fourth on my team in points. I was 21 years old. I had an unbelievable season. Any other kid, if a first rounder would have had the season I had in my second year, it would have been, Todd, we're looking forward. You're progressing great. Let's get her going. Well, I get brought into the room, and the first thing David says to me goes, Todd, good season. Unfortunately, we're going with a youth movement. And I'm kind of looking around. I'm like, am I getting punked right now? Like, is Ashton Kutcher in here? Like, what? I'm 21 years old. I played 2 years pro. I've got 51 points. I've got 115 penalty minutes. Youth movement? And I'm just sitting there. I didn't even know what to say. I'm like, are you kidding? That's the best you can come up with is a youth movement. So it's kind of like, and then it was that quick. He goes, hey, thank you. Good luck with whatever you do. And I walked out the door and I'm like, what the hell just happened? I walked into this door thinking that I'm going to be a mainstay, a piece of this organization for the next 10 years. I was expecting to walk out of there with a contract, yet now I am unemployed and I'm told that I'm too old at 21 years of age. I was like, So that was my first kind of introduction to the politics of hockey at certain levels.
That was Todd Hlushko, a 1994 silver medalist at the Olympic Games with the Canadian national team, now director of pro scouting for the Mannheim Adler of the DEL, and former Calgary Flame, Pittsburgh Penguin, and Philadelphia Flyer. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. You are listening to guest Todd Hlushko today. I have been waiting a while to have Todd on the program. Todd is just one of those guys that you smile every time you think about him because some memory comes back from your time with him. He does not like peace and quiet, whether it's in a dressing room or at a restaurant or at any type of get-together. So he's usually the life of the party, because if there isn't any life in it, he's going to add it. And yeah, so he brought lots of laughs to my dressing room in Mannheim with the Adler. When I had a chance to connect with Todd for the first time. And yeah, tons of good stories go along with that name, and tons of great memories go along with it as well. So I wanted to have Todd on for a while. He's still involved in the game here now with being the director of pro scouting for the Mannheim Adler of the Deutsche Ice Hockey League, and I think he's also director of player personnel there as well. He was with Sportsnet. He was doing color for the Leafs on the radio back in Toronto. And yeah, he's just stayed around the game, and I'm glad he has, because he's one of those personalities that the game needs and the game can endorse. So Todd had his own journey to the NHL. He played 79 games in the NHL. His route took him through the Ontario Hockey League with the London Knights and Owen Sound. Got drafted as a late round pick, ended up playing in Baltimore in the AHL, fought his way onto that team, and then ended up with the Canadian national team. And went on that remarkable and historic run with the Canadian national team all the way to a shootout in the gold medal game, a game that they were not supposed to be in, and gave us some national pride there with that team. And came back, ended up being an NHLer, played a full season with the Flames, granted some concussion issues, and so on and so forth. He ended up going to Mannheim, and we became teammates. So you're going to enjoy his story. He has an interesting perspective on the game. Because of his time as a player, he now has attached what he felt was important to him as a player and to the teams he played with, what characteristics. He attaches that to who he looks for in his players today. And with no surprise, character, competitiveness, work ethic, these types of things are things that Todd watches for. And I'm glad that he mentioned it because, if you've listened to anything that I've done before, I believe that these intangibles are things that more than ever are pushing players to the next level. Teams want these type of individuals in their locker rooms, and they're actually looking, researching, investigating to make sure that these players are put together the right way because they want to invest in the person as much as they want to believe in the player. So you're going to enjoy this one. Lots of good laughs. Make sure you stick around to the end. We talk about a game called the Consequence Game that you're all going to love. Some amazing stories with that. I know you're going to get some good laughs. So without further ado, I bring you my old teammate and friend, Mr. Todd Hlushko. All right, here we are, episode 62 of Up My Hockey with Todd Hlushko as the guest. Todd, welcome, and thanks for coming on the program.
My pleasure, Jason. Been looking forward to this. You've promised to get me on a bunch of times, and I guess you must have ran out of guests to pick from, and you finally gave me a call. So happy to join you.
Typical fashion, you start off with a little white lie already, hey, just to stir the pot. Todd's been avoiding me for a while now. I thought maybe he didn't want a piece of this, but his schedule opened up, and he said, "Hey, let's do it," and here we are.
Exactly. I'm excited to talk to an old teammate again, and maybe conjure up a couple old stories again, and talk about our couple years in Mannheim, Germany, which was a lot of fun. Which
were good ones, yeah, for sure. For sure, we'll get there. I love this. I love doing this because, even back in Mannheim, I don't think it existed, but like Hockey DB, for instance, like I don't even think that was around. And if it was, we weren't smart enough to find it. So like sitting here talking with old teammates and seeing, your evolution and your history is like super interesting to me, and having a chance to talk about it now after the fact is pretty wild too. So I'm looking forward to digging in here. I didn't know that you were a 12th round draft pick.
Yeah, is that the good thing that existed back then? I would have. I didn't know. Well, of course, I knew there was a 12th round, and the worst part was I actually thought it was supposed to go in the 4th round, which is a pretty funny story because I ended up going to the draft in Vancouver thinking that I was going to be a 4th round pick. And back then, as you know, the draft was one day. It's not like it is now where they have it over 2 separate days, either the first round, the first day, and everything else after the second day. And there was only, 6 rounds now, whereas back then it was 12. And I was sitting at BC Place thinking I was going to go in the 4th round. And to my joy, I was sitting in the stands for about 12 hours waiting for my name to get picked. There's a funny story to go with that. We'll dive into that later. But yeah, 12th round.
Well, let's get, because that is like, so you did go. So you were one of the kids that Don Cherry was speaking to about don't go to the draft unless you're a first rounder. And so his wise words, would you have listened to them now after the fact?
Well, I don't, you know what, probably still not, because it was a funny time where, like I had my agent in Guelph, Ontario. His name was Rolly Thompson. That's who I had as a play agent. And I don't know if he was too cheap and he didn't want to flip the plane ticket for me to come out, or he was actually giving me good advice. And, ultimately, I guess it would have been good advice because we ended up going. My dad goes, listen, he says, it's once in a lifetime. Why wouldn't you go experience this? You're rated in the 4th round. Chances are that you're most likely going to get picked up. And if you don't go in the 4th round, well, maybe the 5th. It doesn't matter. Let's go. It'll be a great experience. My dad actually talked me into it, which I thought was pretty cool. We flew out to Vancouver, and as the story goes, before I went to the draft, on the way out to Vancouver, we stopped in and grabbed a quick piece of pizza before we jumped on the flight. Got on the flight, and wouldn't you know it, I had a bad piece of pizza, and I ended up getting some nasty food poisoning. So the next day when I got up, the draft, I was on the toilet and I was hugging it. It was just awful. It was the worst thing. Right. And was able to scrounge myself together and get to the draft. Got to the draft, so I'm sitting in the stands and I'm just like, oh my God, like it's the worst. The double ender was terrible. I couldn't believe how sick I was. And thinking that I'm going to go in the 4th round. So fast forward.
Suit on though, you're all suited up, like you're ready to go.
Yeah, I'm all done. I got my little zip up tie because I have no money. I got my junior tie, my grade 8 grad suit on. And I'm sitting in the stands, and the first 3 rounds go, which was very long, and then the 4th round comes around. And it's funny because my junior coach at the time, who was Wayne Maxner of the London Knights, great junior coach. Tons of history with him. He's a legend out here in the Ontario Hockey League. Good maritime coach. Anyways, before the draft, a few weeks before, he goes, Todd, I was talking to Washington, and they're interested in you. I think they're going to take you pretty high. So I'm like, that's awesome. So sure enough, the draft starts rolling around, and it's the fourth round. And in Central Scouting, that's where I was ranked. I was ranked in the fourth round. It was right on par where it was supposed to be. So I'm sitting in the stands, and all of a sudden Washington comes to the table. It was Jack Button, the director of player development there. He goes, with the Washington Capitals in the fourth round, I don't know what number it was, but in the fourth round, we'd like to select from the London Knights. So there's nobody else on my team that's rated where I am. There's Chris Taylor's on my team. He's rated in the first round. He already went. A couple other guys in the late round, but I'm the only guy that's rated in the fourth. So they go in the fourth round from the London Knights. So I kind of look at my dad. I stand up. I get ready. And all of a sudden they go, Steve Martell. I sit back down, hunch back down on my seat. And as you know, all your peers and all the hockey guys, they're not going to let you get away with this. They're going to chime in and say something. So I got guys from all OHL teams that I played with that are there as well. Go, sit down, Hlushko, hero. Yeah, you're not that good yet. Get down. Sit down. I'm just sitting like, son of a bitch. And on top of it, I got food poisoning. I'm not feeling good. Thought I was going to go. Fast forward 12 rounds, 6 hours later, I'm sitting with my dad. I go, let's get the hell out of it. What are we doing here? And he goes, we're here the whole time. It's the 12th round. There's one other guy in the stands with me right now. And I still remember it was Ted Miskolzy. And Ted Miskolzy ended up going the very last pick in the NHL draft that year. And Ted's looking at me. He played Windsor. And I'm kind of looking at him. We're like, oh, my God. We're kind of embarrassed. But, all of a sudden, I'm ready to go. I'm like, Dad, let's get it. So Washington has the pick in the middle of the 12th round. And I hear them go in the 12th round. And I'm literally getting up to leave. My dad going to go from the 12th round for the London Knights, Todd Hlushko. I'm like, what the? So I bomb out of there like I'm a first-round draft pick. I sprint down the stairs. There's nobody in the stands. I'm the only guy there with this Ted Miskolzy. And I'm running down to the draft floor. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to get into this area. And the security stops me. They go, what are you doing? Who are you? I go, I just got my name got called. I got drafted. I'm going to the table. Well, nobody has gone down to the draft table for about 6 rounds now. Like, no one is stupid enough to go down. I don't care. I jump over the barrier and I run to the Washington Capitals table. I get to the table and I'm standing over a couple of the scouts and GMs and stuff. And they're looking at me like I'm an experienced, a dream child. They're like, who are you? I go, you just drafted me. Todd Hlushko. Like, oh my God. And I go, where's my jersey? Where's my hat? So they're looking, they got no hats. They got no jersey for a 12th rounder. They didn't know. And anyways, they scrounged up a hat for me. I took my dad over to the NHL logo sign and we did a picture. And I could give a shit that I was a 12th round draft pick. I felt like it was a first round. I got drafted. I was happy. We flew home, had a cake celebration for a 12th round pick. Hey, it is what it is. I got picked up in the National Hockey League draft. I was happy. And that's how the trip ended. So yeah, it was a pretty unique draft for myself.
Oh, I love that. But that's pretty wild though, like that you were able to flip that switch. I mean, quick, right? Because you were ready to go home, obviously disgruntled, discouraged, embarrassed. You mean were words that you use, and all of a sudden your name gets called, and it's like, hey, glory days, let's get down there.
That's exactly. It was more my buddies back home that if I went back to my peer group, they're going to go, what happened? I thought you were going to get drafted. I knew that would have come up, right? And I'm like, I don't care. It's 6th, 12th. I don't care. I got drafted in the NHL. So I was excited. And I thought about how many people my age right now that play junior hockey against me or kids around the world that didn't get drafted. I go, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids. And I got picked up. And so that for me was good enough. And I just knew that was my door, or the door opened for me. Now, anything that I did after this, there's no guarantees in life, but at least you got an opportunity to kick the door down and go try to prove yourself what you can do. That's all I was looking for. So 12th round, first round, I didn't care. I was happy. Obviously, the signing bonus dictated a little bit different in terms of a 1st to 12th round. But at the end of the day, for me, I was just happy that I got picked up and was able to go and try to continue to play hockey and play as a pro and make a living out of it.
Yeah, sure. No, good on you. I mean, that says something about you. I mean, you're definitely a glass half full kind of guy, from my memories of you. Always found the bright side in something or something to laugh about. So that was great that you jumped down there. I'm sure the scouts must have been.
Well, they didn't know who it was. They were looking at me like, who is this kid? Like, and honestly, like, some of these guys that were going first round picks, like, I guess trying to think that year. I guess it would have been Olin Nolan went first round, and then you had then Peter Nedved, and you had Yammer Jagger. That was a draft in the 89 draft or 90 draft in Vancouver. So there's some big names. At the top of the chart, first round was great. So these guys are all dolled out in Hugo Boss suits. They look fantastic. Like they're $1 million suits. And here I am, literally, it felt like a high school grad suit, like from Tip Top Tailors. I just had the zip up tie. It was a busted suit. It was nasty, but it was the only thing I had, so I just wore that.
Puke stains on the front.
Oh yeah,
and everything else. Yeah. But you mentioned the signing bonus. That's one thing I wanted to talk with you about because, well, one, 12th round, like you said, there's lots of kids that don't get drafted, so it's great that you did. Mm-hmm. In some aspects, though, it's sometimes better not to because you can come back and you can be a free agent or whatever the case may be, right? Yep. But then to get actually signed from that spot, they don't sign everybody that they draft. That's the thing that kids don't realize, right? Oh, I got drafted. We still need to get a contract. That just doesn't get given out. So how did that whole process go, and how did you get a contract from the 12th round?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting story because when I did get drafted, I had one more year of junior. I could have went back as an overage. So I actually got drafted as a 19-year-old as well. So I didn't get drafted as an 18-year-old as well. So I got picked up in my last year of junior. And it was interesting because my plan was, if I went to camp and had I not made, at the time it was the American League, it was the Baltimore Skipjacks. I had no interest in going down to the East Coast League. Like if they said, we'll sign you here, we'll give you a 3-way contract, whatever, and go down to, I think our East Coast League team was Hampton Roads at the time. And so with the training camp, I'm like, well, I'm not going. I won't go to East Coast League. So my plan was, if I didn't get a contract with Washington and go to the American League, I was going to go back to the University of Guelph and play CIS at the University of Guelph in my hometown. I had everything all set. I was all enrolled, ready to go. But I told the coach there, whose name was Mark at the time, I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to go to camp, and if things work out and I get a contract, I'm going to stay. But if it doesn't, I'll come back. That's fine. Probably the worst thing I did is because Marlon Mueller ended up calling the GM in Washington every single day. Hey, are you keeping Hlushko or not? To the point where the Jack Button, again, the director of player development, finally came to me one day. He goes, listen, do you want to play CIS hockey or do you want to play pro? I'm getting a call from a coach every single day, busting my chops if we're going to keep you or not. And I'm like, oh my God. No, I go, no, well, yes, I want to play. I want to play in the American Hockey League. Okay, I just want to know that. So I'm like, oh my God, and he's a buddy of mine. Marlon Muir was a good friend of mine, but he almost blew me up by throwing all the, saying, yeah, are you going to send him back? Almost to the point where I was becoming a headache to this guy. Will this guy quit calling me?
Right.
So anyways, it came down to getting signed was an interesting thing because, as you know, 12th rounder, there was, first rounders are getting everything given to them type thing. They're on the scouts' radar, and everyone wants that guy to succeed. I understand. That's just the way the process works. So I'm sitting there. So I thought when I went to camp, I go, I know I'm not I had good numbers in junior, but I'm not going to be that goal scoring guy that's going to, even though I did have decent numbers at the pro level, I'm not going to be that guy. That's not going to be my role. I just got to work harder than everybody. So I remember going to camp, and all I did is I busted my tail, and I caught a lot of flack too, because we'd have practices every day. And from playing pro, Jason, that some of the senior guys, especially in the American Hockey League, if you're in practice, there's guys that are on cruise control. And if you're a young guy and you start bombing by them and doing laps and you're going harder than everyone else, you're going to take a stick to the back of the head or a chop in the back of the ankles from these old guys saying, hey, slow the hell down. Who the hell do you think you are? You're making us look bad. So I knew that was coming, but I knew that that's what I had to do in order to stand out. And that's what I did. Every single practice, I was the first guy in line, call it brown nose and whatever you want. But it was, for me, it was just, I had to take myself to a different level than everybody else in order to get noticed. And that's what I did. So we're doing bag skates. So we're going back and forth, and guys got it in second gear. And I've just cranked it up to the sixth gear. I'm bombing back and forth. And, I look a little bit like a hero doing this stuff. But this is the only way I'm going to get noticed. And the coach that I had there was Robbie Laird. He's currently the pro scout with the Los Angeles Kings. And Robbie really liked my work ethic. And it could have been, it's like, and a lot of other guys know, sometimes it's more about timing and where you are and who likes you in order to get a break. I played with hundreds of guys that were way better hockey players than me, but they maybe just didn't get the break that I got. Robbie Lair really liked me. He said, listen, I'd like to sign this Hlushko kid. And the GM there in Washington, well, all right, we'll give you this kid. You want him, you can have him. So I owe a lot to Robbie Laird. So I get a call from Jack Button. He says, Todd, we got a contract for you. Or he calls my agent. He goes, we got a contract for you. My agent reads it to me and says, this is what they're offering. Like, first of all, I'm over the moon that they're offering me a contract. Now I've got a contract. I'm going to play pro hockey. I know I'm going to be in Baltimore. I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't care what the number is. I'll play for free. I'm happy I'm going to play pro hockey. So he gives me the numbers. He goes, all right, you got a $15,000 signing bonus. So cut that in half with taxes. And I could only get you a 3-way contract. I go, a 3-way contract? He goes, yeah, your NHL salary, your American League salary, and East Coast League. I go, well, I'm not going to the coast. If I go to the coast, I'm going home. Because I know, but that's what they wanted to do. So I said, I don't care. I'll sign it. You don't have to negotiate back and forth. Just, send it to me. So I ended up signing it. 100,000 in the NHL, 35,000 in the American Hockey League, and 20,000 in the East Coast League. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I just want to play hockey. So anyways, I ended up getting that, and the signing bonus. I'd never made any money. I made $65 a week in junior. So I thought this is awesome. Signed it, ended up making the team, and ended up staying with Baltimore for 2 years, and it was awesome. It was a good experience, but that's kind of how everything played out. And again, it was getting an opportunity from a coach that liked what I did. He liked me, and again,
And he was the coach of Baltimore.
That was Robbie Laird, and our assistant coach was Barry Trotz at the time. That was his first pro coaching gig. Was with us for 2 years as well. So had some good coaches in Baltimore. Barry was awesome as well back then. But Robbie Laird gave me my first opportunity, and he believed in the way that I played, and I think it reminded him a little bit of himself when he was a young guy when he played. He told me that a couple times, and I mean, it's not the worst thing to have a coach on your side if something like that.
No, I mean,
to break in, right?
Yeah, that's one thing that I talk about a ton with my players, and like you said, he used the word brown nose, which is, I mean, I think if it's orchestrated, right, and if it's fake, then it is brown nosing.
Yes.
But like if it becomes part of who you are and that's what you do, you know what I mean, then it's authentic. I mean, coaches are going to like that, you know what I mean, and you can't pretend that for a whole season either, right? So, did you have the I don't know what it is, like the emotional maturity at that age to recognize that yes, you needed to stand out in a different way? Like, was that really a conscious thought at that time? Was this is how I needed to do it?
Well, I knew the guys that came in that year. I mean, there was in my draft year, I was looking around, and obviously you're looking and trying to figure out what spots are available. Like, okay, I'm not making the Capitals. Is there anyone from Baltimore that's going to basically make the jump? You've done it. You look at the numbers, you look at the sheets, the roster, and you see, where can I actually fit in here? Is there an opportunity for me to play pro, or am I just here specifically to go through training camp, go through the motions, and then get sent back? And especially if you don't have a contract. So I'm sitting there and I'm doing the math. I'm going through it. And I'm looking at guys that got drafted the same year as I did that played in the OHL, of guys that I knew. There was about 3 or 4 guys that I played against that was in the OHL that got drafted by Washington as well. So I'm like, okay, I've got to stand above these guys. And in my mind, the guys that got drafted ahead of me in the OHL they played against, I thought I was their equal, or I thought I was better than them in my own mind. So I said, okay, I think I can beat these guys out for jobs. And then you start looking and you're going down and you're like, okay, there's 2 spots available. Who do I have to beat out amongst the guys trying out in Baltimore? And I kind of identified those guys. And I knew that for me to really make a difference, or to get noticed, that I could maybe take their spot as opposed to them taking me. I went on one-on-one battles. Anytime I saw a guy that I knew I was battling with, I would jump to that line and say, hey, listen, let me go against this guy. So I would go against them, and I would go balls out, and I would expose these guys. And I would, 80% of the time I was beating these guys in one-on-one battles and competes. So it was making it harder for the guys that were making the final decisions to say, well, we can't keep him. I go, instead, they're saying, no, we have to keep him. Look what he's done. The other guys that are battling for jobs, he's beating these guys. So I was very cognizant of the fact that I had to do something. And one of those things was to go against the better guys in practice, because, you can only do so much and you only have so much time. And I remember that I had a lot of guys. And I think the one thing, Potts, that kind of stood out, I still remember this. If you look closely, I don't know if you can see, I've got a big scar from here up to here, right down the middle of my face. I got a lot of scars. But I remember we were in Lake Placid, New York, and that's where our training camp was a year. And we're playing, I forget which other American Hockey League team was there. We had a little bit of a mini tournament going on. And I remember it was kind of like there's maybe 5 minutes left in the game. And I went to, there was a play and I was driving the net and I took the most vicious, I call it the Western Hockey League cross check because we never got these in the OHL. I took a WHL cross check right to the middle of my face. And there was the skin here. I ended up getting like 35 stitches up my nose from here all the way up. And this piece of flap on my skin, or of my nose, was hanging over. It was literally over my eye. It was hanging, right? So I knew something bad had happened, but I wasn't 100% certain. I knew I was cut. I didn't know it was as bad as it was. But the shift kept going and I didn't go off. I stayed on. The shift went for about another 45 seconds. And I'm leaking. I don't know if you've ever seen Stone Cold Steve Austin when he's in a camel clutch by Bret Hart and he's looking up and he's screaming. His face is covered in blood. Well, I'm going around and I end up on the end of the shift, I end up going and it was a gritty play and I ended up going and I scored. And I scored on the play. Come to the bench and people are like horrified. They're looking at me. My face is like just plastered with blood everywhere, right? And the coaches and the GM, they're all looking at me. And I'm kind of like, what's the problem? I thought they were like going to say, hey, congratulations, good goal. And like a couple of my guys that I know, they go, Hlushko, get to the locker room. You're an effing mess right now. So a doctor takes me to the back. I go to the thing. They clean me up and I look in the mirror. And this piece of skin is hanging over my eye. I'm like, oh my God. So they literally pull it over and they start sewing up. Should have got plastic surgery, to be quite honest. I mean, it's not going to make this face look much better, but I should have got that realistically. Instead, they just stitched me up. And then I went back to the bench with like 2 minutes left. And I had one more shift. And anyways, for me, that was the moment I think I made the team. That was kind of the one moment in your tryouts that you look back, you go, what actually put me over the top? What was it, a fight that I got, or was it a highlight goal? I think it was getting cross-checked in the face and being able to stay on the ice, and then ultimately I ended up scoring and then coming off and getting stitched up and coming back. I think that showed a little bit. But it wasn't that wasn't scripted. I didn't think that. I was a hockey guy. And I go, all right, I got stitched up. That's what happens. You come back and you go play again. Yeah. But then afterwards, when I looked at it a little bit closer, and I did remember how bad the skin was, I probably had no business coming back to the bench. I should have been right to the hospital. But I think that was kind of the I made it moment. And I think that's when the coaches then said, okay, we got to give this kid a chance.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I love everything about that because that is, and it's came up time and time again on the show here. Like one that comes to mind is Dave Scatchard. Another one is Nasher in St. Louis. Scotty Nichols, another guy, like trying to fill these spots that they know there's only a couple, and they're not a shoe-in first rounder that's going to get gifted, opportunities and needed to make a difference. And Scatch did it in Portland. Actually, I wish I could play the clip for you. Like it was a bag skate. He hadn't officially made the team yet in Portland. And it was his draft year. He was just trying to make the Portland Winterhawks. And there was still 25 guys or 26 guys at camp. The season had already started. He'd been a healthy scratch once, and they had 6 guys. They had a game that night on back-to-back, and they had 6 guys that were skating in an empty rink for an hour. And Scatch said, like, he was just crushing everybody. Like how you said, right? Like he just wasn't holding back. And he's like, and there was that, that peer group pressure of like getting the hairy eyeball. And he said he wasn't making any friends and he wasn't doing this, but he's like, he just knew there's something inside of him that said, I just got to go. And at the end of that 60 minutes, they told him he was in the lineup that night. And the other 5 guys got sent home. And the GM was up in the rafters watching, and that's what they wanted to see, right? Like who had what it took. And the next year he was the captain of the team. Like it's crazy though, right? Those little decisions in those moments. Like,
well, I'll tell you, it's so funny, and I know we'll get into it as we talk more. But like with what I do with my scouting right now, that's one of the biggest things on my checklist. Is I'm looking at a guy's compete level, and I tell this to young guys all the time. I've got buddies that got kids that are maybe just about to get drafted or trying to get noticed to get drafted in the OHL or in junior or anywhere, or just kids that are, they ask you, what is that one thing I can do to kind of, that I can take me to the next level? And I go, well, listen, you can't make yourself taller. You can't make yourself a whole lot faster. You kind of are what you are at this moment. But one thing that you can determine and what you can do is your work ethic and your compete and how you are every single shift. And I go, so when I'm looking at a guy and I'm seeing if someone's right for our team, one of my first things is, how's this kid's compete on every single shift? What does he look like? What is he doing? Is he just gliding? Is he going through the motions? Or does he want to be a difference maker every single shift? That's one thing that you can control over anything else. You can't control how big you are. You can't control how fast you are. You are. But you can definitely control your work ethic, your compete, and how bad you want it. And for me as a scout, that's one of the biggest things I look at every time I'm determining if I want a guy to come play for us or not.
Awesome. Oh, I love that. That's like that minute clip there will be played again because I named my spring team. So I got a North Zone spring team. So like best 09 players right now in North Okanagan Valley, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I named it the Compete, the Up My Hockey perfect. Compete. Because that is the difference maker. And I think even more so, I mean, like the level of compete you talked about that you showed there, like with the skin flapping down your face and not coming off. And like, I mean, that is obviously next level type of competitiveness and wanting to be on the ice. I think that's kind of taken a little bit of a decline in recent years, just with the way the game's played and the skill development. So I think it's easier than ever to stand out with your compete, I think, on the ice, like to win those battles and to show that you're tenacious and you want to, whatever it is, willing to pay the price to make a play. And so in other words, it's really, really a high commodity, I think. Like, as you're saying, you're watching that, right? And you're like, I want that guy. Because there's a lot of guys that can toe drag now. A lot of guys can toe drag and a lot of guys can do this and that, but not everybody wants to compete day in and day out.
It's an attitude. It's your attitude towards the game and what you want to do. And that's, like I said, it doesn't take a skill set to do this. Or it's like some guys just have better hands than guys. That's just the way it is. I was a straight ahead dump and chase guy. I knew I wasn't going to be dangling guys. I couldn't compete with you in a shinny game on the ice in practice. I knew I would get dangled. But what I did know is I could work my tail off. And at the end of the day, the guys that I'm skating against going, I hate playing against that guy because he doesn't stop. And that's what I look for on a day-to-day basis when I'm looking at players that I want. I want those kids that work their tails off. I don't care. Like the way that I always say, if you have a choice with two guys, whether it's, minor league hockey or you're getting up to the pro level. And if you've got two guys that are relatively close, maybe one guy has a little bit more skill set, but the guy that doesn't have the skill set works his tail off twice as hard as that guy does. I'll take the hard worker every single day. There's a difference if you get that elite talent. You live with the warts of their game. That's just the way it is. You can't. Those guys they're not a dime a dozen. But the middle road guys, if you have a decent skill set and you have that compete level as well, that can take you a long, long ways. A lot of guys, everyone will tell you that. Anybody that was kind of a middle road guy or maybe a top end player in junior hockey that ends up coming to the pro level, but know that there's only a certain amount of guys that are actually going to be in that top 3 or top 6 forward role. You've got to distinguish what you're going to be in the second tier if you want to play pro hockey. And, the majority of those guys, it comes down to how hard they're willing to work and what little things, how the attentions to details that they pay attention to is going to take you to the next level. And for me, that's a huge part. So that's the way I played a little bit. And so maybe I'm a little bit biased on the way that I look at guys when I scout. And I do catch a little bit of heat every once in a while from my GM. He's always like, Todd, this guy doesn't have the best hands. Are you sure that? I go, I don't care if he doesn't have the best hands. Look how hard he's working every day. He's going to make everyone else better, and he's going to pull guys into the fight. So sometimes I pass.
I just wrote that down on my notes. Make you better.
Yeah.
Because that is the difference, right? I mean, you can have, of course, and you've already mentioned it, like the elite level of skill. Hopefully that guy's not your captain. Hopefully he's just along for the ride, but you need those guys in certain scenarios. But those guys essentially bring down the culture of your team if you have too many of them, right?
Absolutely.
So like you got to be super, super specific with who that is. And these other guys are going to bring everybody up, right? And that's just the way it is. And I think the culture of a team and the chemistry of a team there's been much more focus on it, and I think an ability to understand what that actually means at the end of the day. And I think that guys like yourself are now cognizant of that, because you do need those guys who are going to show up every day and are going to elevate, right? The compete level, the chemistry level, all the other aspects that go into making a winning organization. And I mean, I love that you're saying that, because culture is such an important thing, especially in a locker room.
And you know what's interesting too, Jason, especially a reminder to kids that are playing minor hockey that are maybe 14, 15, 16, even 17 years of age that want to get noticed. And I say this to them all the time. I go, listen, be careful of what type of team guy you are, even at the minor league level when you're 15 or 16, you're going through. And I go, and I tell you this because You don't know how far back general managers, coaches, scouts are going to dig back into your past to find out what type of person you are, what type of character you are. I mean, when I'm doing my reports and I'm doing things, I can't tell you that I probably talked to a minor league coach, or if it's an NHL coach, then an AHL coach. I'd even go all the way down to a junior and even a midget coach I've done things on, asking about that particular person. And I mean, you get a really nice grasp of the character of that guy. If I go through 4 or 5 coaches about one player and they're all the same and they're all saying, great guy, awesome guy, would love to have him on you'll love to have him on your team. He works his tails off. He loves the gym. He likes to work out. Then that's a check mark. You're done. But then all of a sudden, if you start getting different views and the majority is saying, probably not want a guy like that on your team. He's a good player, but doesn't really bring it every single day. Takes time off and practices. Okay, you've got to do a little bit more homework. You got to dig deeper. So all of a sudden you dig deeper further and further. Next thing you know, maybe you're talking to a minor midget coach today. What type of person was he? Oh, he was great. Well, okay, something may have changed at the time. Anyways, my point is, guys go back and they dig back in your background. So if you've got a kid on your team or someone's watching this that plays Bantam hockey and they think that they're the cat's meow and I can do anything I want, coaches can kiss my butt because I'm the best guy out here. Don't be so quick to act that way, because that back then could bite you in the butt as you move on up the ladder. It's the way it is. I've seen it happen a ton of times. And just from a personal experience myself, I dig way back. I go way, way back to find out as much as I can about a guy before we're ready to sign someone.
Yeah, good for you. And that is your history follows you. And of course, people can change. I mean, that's one thing that I talk about a lot. Is like, I don't think people. People recognize the fact that there is redemption and you can make mistakes, and we have the ability to show up a different player the next season. But there is a history, right? And a lot of times, we're not aware of that history, right? We're just going along for the ride, and we show up at the scene and we think that we're a finished product. But people look, people dig, and I know myself, I evolved as things went too, right? I mean, there is things you pick up, and a lot of this stuff, like conversations like having with you right now, like, my goodness, if I could listen to 4 conversations with scouts, like having right now, like understanding what is actually looked for, and then not only to understand what they're looking for, but understand how that actually applies to me being a better hockey player. Yeah. I mean, that's like real solid motivation for like why you should want to make change and why you should want to be a better teammate or a better competitor. Jason,
the one thing I look at too is, again, we go back to what I was talking about, is you can only do so much. I mean, like I said, you can't make yourself bigger, taller, or whatever, but what you can do, you have to control the things you can control. And one of the things that you want to control is the way that you present yourself on a daily basis. You control that. And don't ever give a scout, a GM, a coach any reason to not like you. And like believe me, there's already enough out there that scouts and GMs and pick apart. Like they can pick a game apart, as you know. You could think you had the best game of your life, and then you go to video, and a coach can basically dissect all the crappy parts of your game, even though you had the best game of your life, you thought. It's so easy to pick apart and dissect different parts to make that guy look bad. They don't want to do that, but they can do that. So what I'm saying is eliminate any of the easy things. I mean, body language, going to about, like, not back checking, doing things. They already have enough things that they can pick apart in your game. Don't give them anything else, especially things that you can really control.
Yeah, it's super competitive. Yeah. How about you in pro? So you end up earning this job, playing for Robbie and for Barry Trotz, one of the best future coaches to ever play the game. How was that transition into pro hockey? Was there other like learning curves there? Like were you figuring it out that first year?
Sorry, you froze up there. I missed your question.
Well, I said, what was that first year like for you as a pro? I mean, playing under those two guys and trying to figure out the professional system and playing in Baltimore there, finding your own place for the first time, figuring that whole thing out. What was that like?
Oh. Yeah, no, it was exciting. But it was an eye opener. That's for sure. I mean, the good thing is obviously your first year pro, there's going to be a couple other guys that are 20 years old, 21 years old that are trying to figure it out as well. So I ended up having a really good roommate. I don't know if you would have ever played against them. Western League kid named Jason, Matheson, played the big defenseman. God, why can't I remember the last name? One of my best buddies, and I'm having a brain fart on his name. But Matheson he played for the Regina Pats, big defenseman, big strong fighter, good guy, and an awesome individual. So I ended up moving in with him the first year. And then I also had roommates like Olaf Kolzig and Reggie Savage and Byron Defoe. So throughout my 2 years, I had guys like that. So to be able to lean on some of the other guys as well was pretty cool, especially a guy like Olaf Kolzig, who was a first rounder, and they loved him, and he was gonna make it, as was Byron. Those guys were really helpful in the transition of finding a place to live. I mean, we lived in a little suburb called Columbia, Maryland, which is just outside of Baltimore. And if you've ever been to Baltimore, it's the Inner Harbor, the city itself is gorgeous. But you got to be careful. If you walk a couple blocks off the beaten path of where you shouldn't be, it can get pretty dangerous pretty quickly. I mean, there was times that we were walking. I'm a 20-year-old kid, and I'm driving into the Baltimore Arena downtown Baltimore, and I have my first car was a little white Dodge Shadow. It had the fender. I thought it was so cool. It was a sport model, and had the little windtail on the back, but it was white and had Ontario plates on. I'm like, there couldn't be more of a bigger bullseye of me driving this car with out-of-state plates downtown Baltimore. So I had to be very cognizant of the fact of where I was at all times and understand where I was going in a big city as a 20-year-old. I mean, I got a 20-year-old son right now that's going to school, and I'm just like, how would he handle it right now if he was down in a big place in the States right now? Like, would he be ready? And in my own mind, I'm like, I hope he would. But I look back at was I really ready? Not really, but I had to learn on the go, that's what life's all about, right? You've got to earn your way and figure it out. So to answer your question, it was difficult, but it was exciting. And it was a challenge, and I was excited to take that challenge. And it probably took about, I don't know, maybe a month or so to really feel comfortable with my surroundings, understand how to pay bills on my own, how to understand my banking, how to understand all that stuff. And then also learn to become a professional hockey player and understand that this is my job. And as much as I'd like to go out and have a beer every once in a while, you had to know when to close it off, because this isn't just party life. This is a job. This is something you have to do for the rest of your life. And you've got to be careful that you don't get caught in with the wrong mix of guys. Maybe those career minor leaguers that are 28, 29 that are just riding out at the end of their time, and they want to grab that young guy and have a couple extra pops with them, which I did on occasion. But you had to adjust your life accordingly to how you did it. And nowadays it's even more crazy. I mean, you don't see any guys going out. It's straight back to the house and doing protein shakes and never going out. And that's just the way it is now. It was a little bit different back then. But yeah, it was exciting. It was fun. It was challenging. All things that I wouldn't change a thing about.
Right. I see the 66 games. I mean, it's tough to tell by a rap sheet. Is that were there healthy scratches there, or were you hurt?
With Baltimore?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was my first year, you're saying. Yeah, no, I was kind of I was in and out a little bit. Like, again, there was situations where, the fact that I got as many games as I get as a 12th rounder that first year, I was surprised to begin with. But you ran into the situations where we had first rounders and second rounders that the people above were saying, hey, he's got to play. And that's what it was. I mean, I understood that. I was low on the totem pole of what they wanted. They needed their first rounders, second rounders. So there was a few games that I missed out on. Didn't really get hurt that season. Maybe a couple nicks and bruises, but for the most part, those were just healthy scratches to get other guys into the lineup, move up and down. The one thing I was proud about is they never wanted to send me down to the East Coast League. There was always 4 or 5 guys on our team that year that did go up and down. And I said, I don't want to be part of that group. And I didn't. And that was one of my goals, was to have a good year, but make sure that I wasn't one of those guys that was on that taxi squad of going back and forth from Hampton Roads to Baltimore.
Did you keep that same kind of level of intensity that you showed in camp that got you the job? Like, were you still trying to push the pace in practice and, being that guy that showed up all the time?
Oh yeah. All the time. I mean, because you never know, like every time that you're practicing, you don't know, again, giving them an excuse to do something, giving them an excuse. Well, he doesn't work hard in practice. Well, I wasn't going to give him that excuse to send me down. I was going to always make sure that I was the one guy that did everything at 100% all the time. And, as time got on and I got older and I was maybe a little bit more comfortable with my positioning as a pro as I moved forward. Well, maybe I turned into a little bit of that vet guy a little bit when the next young guy came up and started bombing around, and I'm like, hey, slow down. But then you think back and you go, I was exactly like that, so I understand.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today. Special thanks to all of you who have contributed to the publicity of the show, whether that be in your car rides, playing it for somebody new that you're traveling with, whether that be shared with your friend on social media, or talking about it at a dinner, or writing a review, which is the best way to do it on iTunes. Writing a review on iTunes gets to a lot of people. It helps the podcast reach new ears. And one of my most favorites was a review that said best podcast ever. So thank you so much for that one. That one made me smile. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it, and continue to reach me directly with your comments and saying how much the conversations matter to you and make a difference. So once again, thanks so much for the support. Please, if you haven't already, take the legitimately 20 seconds it takes to go on iTunes and give a review, and 5 stars, or even just 5 stars and don't leave a review. Both matter, both help, both get the podcast out there and get it into to new audiences. So thanks again. Now back to the show with Todd Hlushko. Yeah, I remember Trevor Letowski, just right now, and there's numerous guys like that. First year pro is sometimes the hardest because, as hard as junior is to be successful in junior, not everybody can do it. The guys that make the pro are usually guys that have been successful in junior, and then they run into a pro scenario, and it is different. Maybe you're not in the power play, maybe you're not even in the lineup, maybe you're playing these Bills. And I just remember Trevor saying, I think he didn't score in his first 24 games or something as a pro, and he wasn't playing much, and he was up and down, and just a real struggle. So it was good to see that you were. I guess you were grateful, right? Really, you were grateful, and you're working your tail off. You're happy where you were, and you're earning that every day. So, I think expectation is a big thing. Even going back to the draft, right? When you think you're going to be 4th round, you turn in at 12. It's pretty easy to be disappointed, right? Yep. But if you're on that team and you're happy just to be on that team, you're doing everything you can every day to stay on it. So there's not much need to be disappointed if you're not in the lineup.
No, 100%. And again, I always looked at it as it's always a privilege to be able to play pro hockey, and it's not a right. I don't care how good you are or what everyone told you your whole life, and we've all played with those players that have been told that they're the greatest things in sliced bread, and some of those guys, it would get to their head, and they would believe that stuff, and they would carry that attitude into a dressing room or locker room. And I played with a lot of those guys, and a lot of those guys didn't really go very far because they had that mentality, as opposed to just understanding that it's not a right. It's a privilege to play pro hockey, and you have to sacrifice, you have to do things. You can't just go and do whatever you want and not abide or buy into a coach's system or an organization system. You've got to be willing to give and take a little bit. And the guys that didn't do it, that had all the skill in the world. I could go over 100 names of guys that were way better than I was. And I'm like, and if they would have just paid a little bit more attention and bought into what was being asked of them, they would have had great careers. So, It is what it is. It is
what it is. You did a real successful second season there, pro, and then you hopped into the Canadian Olympic team. Walk us through what that decision was like, because I believe your contract was done, or walk us through how you end up playing for Team Canada.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty funny story too, and it's the beauty of this is I was able to talk to a GM, this GM, years and years later after my career was over, and he's still a GM. So the GM of Washington that year was David Poyle. David Poyle, great guy. And what a success he's had. He's been unbelievable in everything that he's ever done as a general manager in the National Hockey League, international hockey with Nashville. He's been awesome. So it's kind of funny. So I'm sitting there, and it's kind of the year-end meetings. And it was interesting because I'm in Baltimore, and Camden Yards. I'm a huge baseball fan. I loved everything about it. I love that Baltimore was right downtown, down the street from us. And they built a brand new stadium called Camden Yards, which is today, it's still there. And one of the most picturesque stadiums, I think, in the major leagues right now, even. So that day that I had my exit meetings, I had tickets to go to the season opener of Camden Yards in Baltimore. I think they were playing the Yankees. George Bush was throwing out the first pitch. It was going to be awesome. So I go into my meeting with David Poyle, and that my second year, I think I was 3rd or 4th on my team in points. I was 21 years old. I had an unbelievable season. Any other kid if a first rounder would have had the season I had in my second year, it would have been, Todd, we're looking forward to, you're progressing great. Let's get her going. Well, I get brought into the room, and the first thing David says to me, he goes, Todd, good season. Unfortunately, we're going with a youth movement. And I'm kind of looking around. I'm like, am I getting punked right now? Like, is Ashton Kutcher in here? Like, what? I'm 21 years old. I played 2 years pro. I've got 51 points. I've got 115 penalty minutes. Youth movement? And I'm just sitting there. I didn't even know what to say. I'm like, are you kidding? That's the best you can come up with is a youth movement. So he's kind of like, and then it was that quick. He goes, hey, thank you. Good luck with whatever you do. And I walked out the door and I'm like, what the hell just happened? I walked into this door thinking that I'm going to be a mainstay, a piece of this organization for the next 10 years. I was expecting to walk out of there with a contract, yet now I am unemployed and I'm told that I'm too old at 21 years of age. I was like, what the heck are you? What the? So that was my first kind of introduction to the politics of hockey at certain levels. 12th rounder, whatever, you're disposable. We've got to make sure that we groom these other first and second rounders and third rounders, because the scouts that pick those guys are going to be bitter and they want to see these guys and our organization. You know how it goes. That's just the way it is. I no bitter feelings as I look back on it, but at the time I'm kind of like youth. So anyways,
yeah.
Fast forward, I get a couple
So
offers.
that means you're a free agent. So you're a free agent.
Yeah, I'm a free agent. Yeah. And, I'm thinking I'm going to get a lot of offers from other teams. Didn't happen. And I'm like, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe it was just a lucky season. I put up decent points. What's going on? So finally, my agent was looking around a little bit, and I ended up getting an offer for a 25-game American Hockey League tryout in Moncton. I'm like, I'm not going there. And then I got a call from the Canadian national team. And back then, the national team program had a full-time team. So they would have a whole lineup. We got paid absolutely peanuts. I mean, I talk about, not going there to make money. Your training facility was out of Calgary at the Father David Bauer Arena right beside the University of Calgary. And you weren't in a league, and all you did is you practiced. It seemed like you practiced 7 days a week, and then you would play one game every 4 weeks. I mean, I've never been in the better shape of my entire life playing for that program. But I didn't have anything. I went to these tryouts, and I tried out, and they said, all right, would you like to be on this team? And the caveat was, if you play well this year, we'll ask you back next year. And next year is the Olympic year. The Olympics are in 94. And if you have a really good season with us here, you can come back and hopefully make the team. There's no promises, but hopefully you can make the team to go to the Olympics. So that was kind of the only reason why I even went. I was like, the Olympics would be a lot of fun. I would love to do that. Went there. My first year was awesome. I wouldn't give it away for anything. We traveled to Japan. We traveled all over Europe. I saw the world. And then I saw all of Canada, because we'd always play these international friendly games in places like Baie-Comeau, St. John's, Newfoundland, up in Northwest Territories. I saw places in Canada that I would have never have ever gone to had it not been for this program in hockey. So I went around and we traveled, and a lot of guys on the team were guys like me that just couldn't find places. We called ourselves a bunch of misfits. We are the misfits, right? Like, we are the cast-offs that couldn't land a pro job somewhere, or someone didn't want us. And we ended up getting together on this Canadian team, and we represented Canada. We played at international tournaments, the Deutschland Cup, the Swiss Cup, all these different ones. And we would get destroyed, Potsy. I mean, we would get destroyed. I remember going to the Izvestia Cup in Russia with our cast-off team. And that was in 92. And that's when the Red Army was like just going full bore. And they had like Bykov and Komatov. I don't know if you remember those guys. But if people wanted to Google them, these guys were like legendary players from the late 80s into the 90s. Were unbelievable players. And we went out and we played in this Izvestia Cup in Moscow. And I remember going out there, and I thought I was in the Rocky movie. I'm looking around, and all of life seemed to be black and white in Russia. There's no color, no nothing. People lighting up, having cigarettes, smoking in this old. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the building, but it was the most historical Russian arena in Moscow. And it was like a church. It was all wooden seats. It was beautiful. But we went out there, and I have never been schooled so bad in my life by these European teams that were ahead of their times with taking the puck up, dropping it back, circling, not dumping the puck in. We're like literally with our heads like chickens with our heads. We didn't know what the hell was going. Next thing you know, the game's over. It's like 9-0. I'm like, and then reports are getting sent back to Canada. Team Canada gets crushed 9-0. I'm like, so now I'm a part of this team that's just getting reports back that we're getting destroyed. So with that said, we had to learn, and you learn. I played that whole year out, and it was an unbelievable experience. I played against some of the best hockey players I've ever played in my life. And then the next year rolled around, and it was an Olympic year. I got invited back. And again, there had to be about 60 players that had been invited back. Like, good luck making this team, because now you're getting the top college guys that want to come because it's the Olympic year. You're getting some guys with tons of NHL experience that want to come because it's the Olympic year. So now you're just scratching and crawling every single day to go back to what we talked about, making sure you don't give the coaches a reason to cut you. You had to try to be the hardest working guy now amongst all these other guys that are just as hungry as you. So it was quite a challenge. And we went through, we probably went through 60 players that season before we finally got to the final cuts to make it to the Olympics. And fortunately for me, I was one of the guys. It was myself, Adrian Aucoin, and Derek Mayer. That was the three of us that did the national team in '93, and we came to '94. And only the three of us were the ones that actually made that team and went to the Olympics in '94. So we were lucky. I mean, obviously, Adrian Aucoin goes on. His resume speaks for himself. He was a young guy, came from Boston U, and he was my roommate for a couple of years too. So he went on and he had an unbelievable NHL career. And Derek Mayer was kind of like me. He jumped around, and then he went to Europe and stuff. But ended up making that team, and to go to the Olympics and participate those 2 years of, looking back, and David Poyle saying, hey, good luck, youth movement, blah, blah, blah. In hindsight now, probably two of the best years I ever had in my life of playing hockey, because it wasn't about earning money. It was just about doing something that you're really passionate about, and ultimately having a goal and eventually succeeding and getting to that goal that you laid out for yourself, which was the Olympics in '94.
Yeah, I want to dig into that silver medal run, because it was really, epic by a lot of standards. But first, just a little life question. So you are 22 or 23 at the time, and you're saying it wasn't for the money. Like what were you doing for a living? It was enough to make a living, but that was just barely it, or how did that work?
When I was in Baltimore my first year, this is how much I thought I was rich. Making 25 grand or whatever in the American League. I remember I had a good buddy of mine that was going to Brock University. And he didn't, he was a college student, had no money or nothing. I remember my first paycheck. I thought I was so rich. I sent him a $250 American check, right? And I sent it to him, and I go, hey, Dave, here's just help you out. Hopefully you're doing well. And I'm thinking, I thought my 25,000 was $2 million, right? Like, I just thought it would never end. So I was it wasn't a lot for me. I was a minimalist. I didn't really, we grew up. I grew up in a middle-class family, and we were very well supported. I think we didn't have to struggle at all, but we didn't have all the major luxuries of life. So it didn't bother me. And I thought that much amount of money, and just for playing hockey, I go, this is great. So when I got to that point, I was able to come back, and I didn't have my own place when I was 22. I still came back to Guelph, Ontario, where I live now. And I still had, thankfully I had my parents, and I could go back to my basement bedroom that I had until there was such a time I got tired of living with them. But it was a way of, packing able to continue to do what I was doing, because I didn't have to pay a lot of rent in the summertime or nothing like that. My parents obviously just, stay at home. I had the home cooked meals with my mom, which was great. Yeah. But so it really let me focus just on something I wanted to do. I always thought, I go, not everyone's going to make a pro career at 20 and go on and play the next 15 years. There's going to be obstacles in your way. This was my obstacle. I was going to be a late bloomer, and the Olympics was a stepping stone for me to get to my next level. But the truth of the matter, Jace, is that I didn't look at that. My end goal, right at that particular, I had short goals. My end goal was just to get to the Olympics. That was it. Had I made the Olympics, then in my mind, I thought, I can live with that. I'm done. If I go any further than this, I don't care. If I can get to the Olympics, I've been drafted. Now I've played in the Olympics. I played pro hockey. Life is great. I can go on and do whatever I want. Well, yeah. Once you get to that level and you have success breeds more success. And now all of a sudden, GMs that didn't want me 2 months before the Olympics started, now I got 4 teams that want me because the Olympics is over. We won a silver medal and I had a good tournament. I'm the same goddamn player I was 2 months ago as I am now, but because you were put on a bigger stage and you had more spotlights on you, you became more desirable. And then I still remember one GM, I know Glenn Sather offered me a contract in Edmonton. I had an offer in Calgary and I had an offer in Philadelphia. So it's kind of like as soon as one GM thought those guys are interested in him, it kind of felt like another GM, well, if they're interested, maybe we should be interested. And it was kind of funny the way it turned out. But ultimately my goal was just to get to the Olympics and play and have a good tournament. And if something happened after that, great. If it didn't, hey, I'm good with it. One of the guys that I played with, Kenny Loveson, one of the best defensemen I ever played with. He played the 1 year, 2 years actually with me in Baltimore, which is kind of funny. Turned out to be a very good friend. He played CIS hockey in Saskatchewan, University of Saskatchewan, came out. And to this day, Jason, if he ever, after the Olympics were over, decided he wanted to continue to play pro hockey, he would have been a 10-year NHL defenseman for sure. So he's kind of the example that I would have taken as well. But he decided, you know what? I'm content. I'm happy. I don't want to play pro hockey anymore. And he stopped. And he's a successful businessman out in Grand Prairie, Stony Plain, Alberta right now. Him and his family own 9 billion grocery stores. It's an awesome story. But Kenny was one of those guys that said, all right, I've reached what I wanted to reach. I'm happy and I'll move forward. So that would have been, I could have done that as well. I chose to continue. He chose to stop.
I was going to ask that with those 2 years, do you think that was good from a developmental standpoint of Todd Hlushko? Like, did you get better there more so than you would have playing pro hockey, do you think?
I think I understood how there was more discipline in that program. Tom Rennie was our coach. Everyone knows who Tom Rennie is, Hockey Canada guru of everything now, and was a Kamloops. I think he coached in junior back then. And Danny Dubé was our other assistant coach. Two great guys, but they didn't let us off the hook on anything. They made us work our tail off, and it was a character building year. And I realized that if I could get through those 2 years, I can get through anything after that. And practices and everything was going to seem so much easier than what I did for 2 years with the Olympic program. And it really was, to be quite honest. And you had to be careful not to fall back into the, relaxing type atmosphere. Like, you worked so hard during those 2 years with the Canadian, and it elevated your game to another level, physically, condition wise. I learned so much in that program. But also being able to travel the world and seeing different parts of the world. That was the culture and understanding. And it was an educational 2 years, something I probably wouldn't have got if I would have just stayed in the American League trying to go through. So it was a different route, but a route that I enjoyed going.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, I say that about even going to Germany. I came over relatively young, and then, on my own personal path, decided to sign that 2-year contract, or extension, which you told me to. And I remember that having those conversations, and it was just great. From a life perspective, as you said, right? The hockey was still good and it was there, and that was the backbone of why I was there. But I would never have been in Germany and living in Germany and getting to travel to France and, Brussels and all these places that were around there. You can never take that away from me now. And it's nothing I would ever want to take away, it was just a really great opportunity.
There was a lot of guys that did it as well. But I know when you got over there, you had tons of questions about, if I took the train to here, how long would it take? Where could I go to? And you really explored everything. You're the one of the guys of all the guys that I've played with over all those years. You made sure that you had a good balance of playing pro hockey in Europe, but you also made sure you had a balance of living in Europe and taking it in and enjoying it and going and seeing different places. And I know, you were single back then, so you were able to kind of pick up and go wherever you wanted. Whereas guys like us that were married, had kids, it wasn't quite as easily. So there was a lot of envy from a lot of the married guys when we'd see you pack up your bags and zip off to Amsterdam for a day or go to Paris, jump on the train, and then come back with stories a couple of days later about how much fun it was. But that's a big part of it. So going over to Europe, it's a professional league. It's a job, and ownership and coaches, they treat it like it's the NHL, but you still have to make sure that there has to be that proper balance, especially if you're a North American kid coming over to Europe. You want to experience those things. And I know you did.
Yeah. For me, that was the biggest draw, really. And it was awesome. But anyway, enough about that. I want to talk about the Olympics, though. I mean, and I know we're already an hour in. It's been awesome chatting with you. But like that year, just for people who maybe aren't as familiar with it, not that I'm even super familiar with it, but you had some big names on that team. Yes. I mean, Peter Nedved was there. Paul Correa was there. A young Paul Correa was there. Brett Lindros was there. There were some names that people would recognize, but you were still not supposed to be in the gold medal game by any stretch of the imagination leading up to that. I mean, it was a trying year in a lot of ways, leading up to that Olympics, and kind of it was the perfect storm. Like, what do you remember from that? Because as you said, it was probably two of your best years ever. I could just imagine that because it was just so special, right? Getting to where you guys got to, and then obviously so close to winning the gold, which would have been amazing. But tell me a little bit about that and your memories from the Olympics itself, or maybe the lead up to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was pretty cool. Like you mentioned, a lot of elite names that went on to have unbelievable careers. And the thing you're right about that. There really wasn't anyone that was established yet. Okay, we had a Chris Kontos that had that magical run in Tampa Bay when he was leading the NHL in scoring. So he came as a veteran guy on our team. We did get Peter Nedved, who was, defected at the time, the Czech Republic, that came and played for us and got a stats, obviously a world-class player. But then you had the unknown of Paul Correa coming out of Maine. He was going to be the superstar, but he was still only 19. He was like Peter Forsberg at the Olympics. We know he's going to be great, but is he going to be great at this level right now, which he turned out to be? And then we had numerous guys like our defense, or like unsung guys, like Chris Therien didn't really even play in the Olympics, and he went on to have an unbelievable NHL career. Adrian Aucoin was our fifth or sixth defenseman, goes on to have an unbelievable career. Guys like Brian Savage, Todd Warner, the list goes on and on with some of these guys that didn't have the big names going in, but again, used it kind of as a stepping stone to get to the next level. So they were unbelievable players, but as you said, kind of the names were unknown. And then you throw a scatter of guys like myself that have already played some pro that didn't really, people still, they knew you, but they didn't know who you were. So we had a really, really cool collective group of guys in that organization. So we went into the tournament. I don't know if they officially had ranking systems, but from what we were hearing, and maybe it was our own selves, and we were kind of motivating ourselves, going, no one respects what we're going to do here, and rightfully so, because we didn't have great tournaments leading up. I remember we played the American, the U.S. team 15 times throughout leading up to the Olympics, and they had all these young college kids, and they were fast. And I thought, and all of us thought that these guys were going to be a gold medal threat going to the Olympics. We played them 15 times. I think we won 3 games. Like, they destroyed us every game leading into it. But I do remember the turning point was we played one last tournament leading up to the Olympics, and we added a couple players. We got Brad Waranka came in from the Edmonton Oilers, a couple other late additions that made our team that much stronger that we really needed. But we played a tournament called the Globen Cup in Sweden, which had the top teams. So Sweden had their Olympic team there, Finland, Russia, Czech, and us. And we went in this tournament, and I think we lost all the games, but we lost by 1 goal in all of them. Where in the previous tournaments that we played, and we were losing 5-0 to Sweden, 6-1 to Finland. We're like, oh my God, what's going on? Right. Tom Rennie put down we decided some of these teams are just maybe a little bit too quick for us. And he instilled basically a 1-2-2 check. So we're going to do the trap to start off the tournament to see how it goes. We started doing it. It was nice because we played Italy first. So we played some weaker teams first, and we were able to build up our thing. We played Italy, and then I think we played France, and then we got into like US, Czech, and then Sweden. So we got or Slovakia and then Sweden. So we got to play these games leading up into the better teams. We didn't really play a 1-3 against, or 1-1-3, 1-2 against the lesser teams, but we did it more against USA and Sweden. And God, did we frustrate them. They got so frustrated in it. Into being wins, turned into beating Sweden the first time we beat them all year in the round robin game. So next thing you know, we finished first in our pool, and we're like, Jesus, we've got a legitimate shot at doing something here. And we just, for whatever reason, just that 2 weeks before, we really gelled as a team, and we came together, and we really started to believe that we could do some damage here and win the tournament. We go on, we play the Czech Republic in the semifinals, goes to overtime, and Paulie Correa scores an overtime winner. And I remember jumping off the bench, and we're all going nuts And we're just looking at each other. And I remember looking at Tom Rennie and Danny Dubé, our coaches that were there for 2 years, seeing like the elation in their eyes, knowing that for 2 years they've been going through this process to get to the Olympics, and knowing that those two guys, along with myself, Derek Mayer, and Adrian Aucoin that went through it, we're going to be playing in a medal game regardless, whether it's gold or bronze. When we won that quarterfinals, we're like, whether we win or lose our next game, we're playing for a medal in the Olympics. That is a massive accomplishment from where we came. We end up playing Finland in the semifinals, who went undefeated and was, to this date, had they beaten us, I think they would have destroyed the Swedes in the finals. They were so good, but we just had their number that day, and we ended up beating them 5-3. They got off to a 2-0 start on us in the beginning of the first period, and I'm like, oh my God, like, is this where it's going to end? And probably my biggest goal that I've ever scored in my life came in that game late in the first period. I scored on a breakaway to make it 2-1, and then about a minute later, Peter Nedved scored to make it 2-2. We go into the second period tied up, and we end up going on and scoring goals, and we end up winning 5-3. They got a late goal. But we won that game, and I remember, Jason, the phones came out in the dressing room. Hockey Canada came throwing phones to everyone. We're all calling our families back home. We're like, oh, my God. And we're screaming. I think I remember, because this is before the NHL players went there, where a lot of, there's still NHL guys, but not the dream teams that they have now. And we're calling home, and guys are like, oh, my God, you're in the gold medal game. And I'm like, yeah, we're in the gold medal game. So this is the cool spot. The coolest thing is the next day, or the next 2 days later, I think, was the final game. It was the last event in the Olympics. It was at 3:30 or 2:30 on Sunday, and the last day of the Olympics. The closing ceremonies were at 7. So we played our game. And before the game starts, this is where I thought that this was going to be the moment of my career. I thought that all the stars and moons had aligned. I go on the bench, and like a lot of people do in hockey, some guys they take their stick, go to the bench and tape it up and look around and just get in your own mind and visualize the game. So I'm doing my stick, and while I'm sitting on the bench, all of a sudden this guy in the suit, broadcast guy, comes up and kind of looks at me. I'm looking at him. I'm like, God, that guy looks familiar. Look again, comes over. Then he comes over and talks to me. He goes, pretty exciting time, man. I go, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then he goes, yeah, I remember in 1980, I did the same thing you're doing right now. I'm like, what the hell? It was Michael Ruzioni. So Michael Ruzioni is doing broadcasts for NBC, and he's sitting beside me, and he's having this conversation with me. I'm like, is this a sign? Like, is this my sign? Is this what, like, this is supposed to happen right here? It was the coolest moment. I got to be honest. So we talk a little bit. He goes back, and I go, and we start playing, and blah, blah, blah. We're a minute away from winning the gold medal. We're up 2-1 with a minute left in the game, and we take a penalty. They end up scoring. The rest is history. Goes to overtime, and then the shootout. We score 2 goals to start off the shootout. I'm like, and we're gonna win this thing in a shootout, even though I hate shootouts. And there's talk in the bench. Guys are like, "Where's your family? Where's your family?" Because if we win this, we're jumping over the glass and we're going into the stands. I knew I wasn't shooting, so I could think that way. But then ultimately, Peter Forsberg goes down and makes that ridiculous goal that's put on a postage stamp for my poor buddy Corey Hirsch for the rest of his life. Has to see that. And then we end up losing it in the shootout and ultimately fall, 1 goal short of winning the gold medal. But at the end of the day, I mean, I still say we never lost that game. It was a skills competition. We lost in the shootout, and we could be so proud of what we accomplished to get to that point. And guys went on from that Olympics afterwards, and they went on to great, bigger and better things even after that. But the cool thing about it is that team that I belonged to that year, just before the pandemic kicked out here with COVID, we had a 25-year reunion scheduled to come to a golf tournament up in Collingwood, Ontario, that I kind of arranged to get everyone there. And unfortunately, there's a couple of guys have passed since then. But the rest of the team, every single guy, including Peter Nedved from the Czech Republic, Paul Correa, who's living in up in California, like every single guy, absolutely, we're on board. Let's go. When does this happen? Everyone was committed. Everyone from Hockey Canada that I called, everyone was coming. That's how special that group was. And to have the excitement of those guys wanting to come back, and even a guy like Nedved that's living back in Czech, who's the manager of the Czech national team, he was all on board. He was coming. To get all those guys to want to come back, that just told you how special that whole run was and how special that team was.
Take one more quick break here just to talk about www.upmyhockey.com. That's where you can find all things Up My Hockey, meaning the services and programs that I provide to young athletes who want to be the best that they can be, not only on the ice, but off the ice. If you're a parent listening, that's the secret sauce, is that often players don't want to invest in themselves unless they think it's hockey related. So things like character and being a good person and being a good teammate and building relationships and having emotional intelligence, these aren't things that younger athletes and even sometimes senior athletes don't really consider as helping their game, but they definitely do. Not only do they help your game on the ice, do they help you control your emotions and increase your personal awareness, but it also helps you create the relationships that create opportunities. It keeps you around longer. It opens more doors for you. There's lots and lots of advantages of working on mindset, working on character, working on ways to handle adversity and to unleash the potential within each of us that I wish I would have known when I was a player, which is really the reason why I'm even here doing this. This is why that podcast exists, is because I think information is massively valuable. And the information that I learned during my career, and now I learn in the stories of others and in the books from other authors and from the research that I've done, really points the way to working on yourself as an individual is going to help you as an athlete. And if you want to be a full-rounded athlete and actually release your potential, when I mean that with all honesty, is that there is a certain level of potential within us, and we should want to explore how great that potential is. I know I left a lot of my potential on the table as a player. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that, but that's just the way it is. And I don't want athletes to leave anything unlocked and inside of them. So that's where my passion lies now, is providing services to teams and to players to really give them the tools required to make the most out of the dreams and goals that they have, and to really get to where they want to get to. So support helps, and I'm here to do that. So if you have a team, if you have an academy, if you have a player that struggles with confidence, that is too overly critical, or perhaps is too complacent, perhaps thinks they got the world by the tail, we need to be prepared for what's to come. We need to be ready for what this game will be throwing to us, because as I know personally, opportunity doesn't come all the time. And when it does come, you want to be ready, and you want to have the perspective and the mindset skills that will allow you to make the most of your opportunities and the career that lies in front of you. So www.upmyhockey.com is where you find out more about that. I am taking bookings for next season, the 21-22 season now with teams. And I am only one guy, so my calendar fills up fast. So if you are interested, please reach out at upmyhockey.com at the contact page there. Now back to the episode with Todd Hlushko. Yeah, no kidding. Success tends to do that, right? Bring guys together. Super cool, man. Like those stories were wild, and for you to be you were center stage on that. You mean, like, as far as you're team leader in goals for that season, as you call it. It's not a typical season, I guess, but scored the most goals on that group, and
we never had to play against the top defensive pairing. That was the beauty of it. When we were the checking, my centerman was Greg Parks, who unfortunately has passed now, and Fabian Joseph. And Fabian Joseph actually played in the Olympics in '92 in Albertville too, and he was our captain. But it's funny, just because I'm not the most the tallest guy in the world. I stand about 5'10". I like to say 5'11" when I stretch my neck out. But for those couple of years with those guys, I was the biggest guy on my line. Those guys were 5'7" and 5'8" respectively. So I was a giant on that line. So it was kind of nice. And
I was going to say, Lush, what neck?
Yeah, hey. There a little bit. But it was pretty cool, because we were the shutdown line. We went against Forsberg. We went against the Stasny brothers in Slovakia. We went against all the big guys to shut them down. And fortunately for us, we were able to score some goals in the time as well, because those guys didn't pay attention to defense as much as they wanted to go on the offensive side of the puck. So we were lucky in that.
Yeah, you threw a few hits too that were quite memorable.
Couple.
And you had some fun there. That was cool. Yeah, and you should be remembered. I mean, that's a super memorable team that really brought Canada together, that Olympics. I mean, following you guys, and you must have came home to some celebrity status. So that was pretty cool. Anything in regards to Paul Kariya? Todd Warner spoke a little bit about him when I had a chance to interview Warnsey. He was 19, turned into be a Hall of Famer in the NHL. I had a chance to play with him at 15 years old with the Penticton Panthers, and saw the level of his skill prowess, and kind of had a little bit of a brush with his mindset, which was a touch different. I shouldn't say a touch, lot different than most guys as far as from his professionalism was concerned. What were your takeaways from playing with Paulie that year?
Well, first of all, we didn't really, I was, obviously like everybody else, here comes this phenom that's been basically advertised as going to be the next Wayne Gretzky, basically. I mean, he did everything he possibly could at the University of Maine, winning the Hobey Baker in his rookie season, doing what he did, winning a national title. I mean, the guy had all the accolades coming in. So coming in as a 19-year-old, to be quite honest, you're a little bit, how is he going to react to us? Number one. But as soon as he came on board, we had, we'd sit down and we'd have dinner with him and we'd talk to him and get to know him. And he was a little bit of a reclusive guy. Didn't really, wasn't a guy that jumped into the story time. He would come and he would sit down at dinner and he'd listen. Wouldn't really offer too much because that wasn't his personality, right? He would want to do his own thing. But he kind of, he had a couple guys that he kind of gravitated to a little bit more. I know he hung out with Greg Johnson a lot, and he hung out with Chris Kontos, who was a bit of a mentor at the time, which was cool. But Paulie was he was a professional. Every single time he came to the rink as a 19-year-old, it was no nonsense. It was right. This is a job right now, and we have a goal to accomplish. So you saw a 19-year-old kid come in and work his tail off and have the skill set that he did. You're just like, thank God this kid is on our team. And he started showing things way above, like he was so mature above his years. He wasn't a 19-year-old coming in our team. You would have thought this kid was 25, 26 years old, the way that he played and the way that he carried himself. And, he was anyone that's ever played with him will tell you, he was a consummate team guy too. Team first guy, put individual goals secondary, put team goals first all the time. And that's why he was so successful with us. He did that, didn't step on anybody's toes, didn't come in like he was a privileged superstar, waited his turn, carrying bags off of like he did all that stuff. He was a great kid and turned into an unbelievable pro. And the best part is he never forgets guys. I mean, when I started calling up and when he went to the Hockey Hall of Fame, or when he was inducted to the Hall of Fame, I was doing broadcasting with the Toronto Maple Leafs for an NHL game, and Kariya was in town, and he made a special effort to make sure to come say hello to me because I got to go see Todd. I haven't seen him in years. So here's a guy, the whole weekend is on him, and he wants to come say hello to me. That's just the type of guy he is. And then when we got this reunion going, and we're going to do it again, Paul didn't want anyone to know anything, and he's like, "Listen, I want to take care of everything." I'm like, "Dude, that's not why we want you." He goes, "No, I want to take care of everything." So the whole thing was going to be, it was a pretty expensive weekend in Collingwood, and he wanted to make sure that no one was going to be struggling to be out of pocket to be there. You don't have to do that, but and he'll be pissed that I've said this now because he didn't want people to know, but that's just the way he is, right? He didn't want anyone to know. I said, "Well, Paul, this is pretty expensive. I'm going to tell guys." So guys were sending me deposit checks and everything like that to go. And he goes, "Well, send that money back to him." I go, "Well, dude, I've got to explain to them what happens. Like, what do you want? Make something up?" He goes, "Yeah, you're good at making stuff up." Tell him. I go, "What? Should I say we found a sponsorship?" Yeah. Tell him you found a sponsorship. So he didn't want anyone to know this stuff. So ultimately, it's unfortunate that our reunion got canceled because of COVID. That's secondary. Everyone has to stay safe. But we will get back and we'll do it again. And he was adamant about saying, "Listen, make sure that this doesn't we don't cancel this again. Let's make sure we're doing this." I was so excited to come, and now it's disappointing that we're not. That's the type of guy he is. He cares about people he played with. He's just a genuine, awesome individual.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love hearing those stories. We got a lot of years left, and we're not going to get them all. But let's talk about your 1 year. You end up signing with Calgary, you said. I mean, it put you back on the map, your run there to the gold medal, as it did a lot of guys in that team. There's some more teams. Phone was finally ringing again, and everyone knew who Todd Hlushko was for a while, and you end up signing with Calgary. Won't get into your reasons why you went there. But it turned out to be, I guess, successful. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to tell me that, but you did have a full season in the NHL at one point there. What was that like? Because that was something that I never got to experience, was having a full season in the greatest league in the world.
Well, it's funny because after the Olympics, and I'll make it quick, I actually signed like right out of the Olympics with Philadelphia. I thought that was my best opportunity. The team wasn't great, so I went there, and I got to play 2 games. That was kind of in the contract. As soon as you went there, it's kind of silly, but that's the way they did it. Is like, okay, we're going to guarantee you 2 games. So that means you're going to get NHL shot. So I went there, played 2 games, then went to Hershey
and scored.
Pardon me? Yeah, I scored my second game against Darren Pupa. I like to say it was a top cheese slapper, one-timer coming down the wing, but it rattled off about 4 different shin pads when I shot and went in. But I did get a goal, which was kind of nice. But played there, went to Hershey, suffered a little bit of a setback in Hershey. It was great because I went there and I played 9 regular season games of those guys, and I had 6 goals. It was like the pace of play for me seemed slow because I came from the Olympics. So the American League seemed even a step down from the NHL. So I was able to, from the Olympics, I was able to really go, and I was flying. Played first playoff game against Cornwall. I took a slap shot right to my eye, and I almost lost my eyeball. So I was out for about 7 days, and that kind of came to an end there. And then I ended up signing with Calgary. And I got to play a full year there. Again, right spot, right time. Had a coach, Pierre Paget, that liked what I did, liked my energy, saw a spot where I could fit in the team. And then, as you know, when I think playing in the National Hockey League, it's all a matter of confidence. You can skate the same as a lot of guys. You think that you can process the game as everyone else. Maybe you don't have the skill of some guys, but you can still skate there. The American League and NHL is very similar in terms of the skating and being able to play there. So I knew I could play there. And then when you're playing 30, 40 games, all of a sudden you get comfortable. Now you're a regular. Now your confidence grows even more. So you do things on the ice that maybe you didn't do in game number 1 that you're really nervous about, or a kid that gets called up out of the American League, and this is his one chance to show what he's got in the NHL. And you try to do too much and you screw up. And next thing you know, you're sent back to the minors. Well, once you have a little bit of that comfort zone and you've established yourself as a regular, then you're not worrying about making mistakes on the ice. And the game becomes so much more easier for you because you're not worrying about that. You're knowing that one bad shift that you're going to have on the ice isn't going to determine whether you're getting sent back to the minors or not. You know you're going to have another day tomorrow. So when I got to that level, and I think a lot of guys would say the same thing, it's all about being comfortable and having confidence playing in the NHL. The game becomes a lot easier to play, and you have more success. And that's kind of what happened to me in Calgary. Unfortunately for me, that same year, this is where everyone has their reasons, but for me, my derailment was I got a really nasty concussion. I got hit by, to this day, maybe I should have watched who I went after, but we were playing Phoenix, and I went after Dallas Drake. He was running around. And if anyone knows who Dallas Drake is, he was one of the best NHL hitters for his pound-for-pound size. Wasn't 6 foot, maybe 180 pounds tops. But, man, this guy could deliver a check. And I remember I caught him with his head down by his boards, by the boards. He was about going for a change. And I took pride in hitting guys as well. And he didn't go off the ice. He was like a heat-seeking missile trying to look for me. And I got a suicide pass from one of our old teammates, Yves Racine, gave me a pass up the middle. And he caught me as hard of a hit as I've ever had. Didn't knock me out, nothing, didn't have anything. But after that hit, I ended up playing a couple more games, and I sustained multiple concussions, and that kind of ended my career, my year. And then I came back the next year, and fortunately, Calgary still signed me to a 2-year contract extension after that year I had, even though I had these issues. They thought I'd be okay, but I just really wasn't the same after that. And that kind of, the NHL side of it kind of went downhill. Ended up going back to the American League and had a good career there. And then eventually took me over to Europe in a situation where I got to experience a Jason Podolin hit from a teammate of ours in practice named Wayne Hines that reminded me a lot of the hit that I got from Dallas Drake. And I still remember that body check that you got in practice. It was a miscommunication, doing an interchange of a circle. And when 180 pounds going about 30 miles an hour meets 260 pounds going 5 miles an hour, that 5-mile-an-hour skater still can take out that 180 pounder. I remember you went down, and I'm no word of a lie, I thought you were dead. I thought the way that he had hit you, it was game, set, match. And I remember busting off that ice, going in the dressing room, getting the trainer to come out. and you were. I thought it was all over because if anyone that knows our good buddy Wayne Hines, he was a husky man, and mass versus I don't know. My math is terrible. I don't go into all the math sides, but it took over and you went down hard. And the sound that I heard in that contact was the most ugliest thug I have ever heard. And it was like, this is you, or this is you, and this is Wayne. And it was one of these. And it was that. And anyways, I know I went off cue there a little bit, but that was what I remembered so vividly in my mind. Is that hit is one of the biggest hits I've ever seen in my life.
Well, I mean, and I guess we have that to relate to because I know up to that point, you mean, you can't play whatever 6, 7, 8 years of pro or whatever I had at that point, and 4 years of junior in the WHL without taking some big hits and some big punches. And I had never had a concussion, like not even close. Like, some guys say, oh, for sure I did. Yeah. I came to the net woozy or whatever. I never had an issue at all with my head. I had I was fortunate with that. But yeah, that morning practice, it was a knee to the head. You mean, now that you brought it up, like my feet went out from under me. Todd's right. And this is the only thing I remember. I remember everything up to that moment, but my feet came out looking back for a pass. And as I was going to the ice, Wayne tried to jump over me, and as he tried to jump, he kneed me in the head while I was looking back. So we're both going essentially full speed, as Todd said. And I don't remember anything. I guess I was out unconscious on the ice and convulsing and doing whatever else I did. I had to spend a night in hospital, but I guess the rollout of that is I know what that's like not to come back from that, because I did get another concussion after that, and I did get another concussion after that, after like the 6 weeks it took me to recover, whatever it was, 2 months from the first one, and I wasn't the same. And you start worrying about that actually too.
It affects your game. The one thing I will say about that is, if anyone who knows Wayne, like we know Wayne, probably the worst thing he could have done was try to do a vertical jump, because that's not in his forte at all. And especially putting that on skates to do that, that was a brain fart on his part. He should have just tried to avoid it or stop. The vertical jump wasn't going to clear you whatsoever.
Oh my God.
Anyways, it's okay. It's good we can laugh about it a little bit now, but at the time that was extremely scary.
I haven't seen Heinze since then. It's funny you're beating up on him pretty good. So I might as well add one more little jab to Heinze, and just for everybody who's listening, and you'll get a kick out of this too. So I come over to Germany. Before you say that, to everyone that knows, Wayne Hines was one of the most creative puck passers I have ever played with in my life. The guy, he's a larger guy, but man, he had silky smooth hands. Unbelievable. Anyways, go ahead. I mean, great that you bring that up. And he was, because he did play the game slower. He's one of those games that slowed the game down, and he always find people. I actually loved when he was my centerman, because we actually were really good together, because he would slow things down and I'd be fast coming down the wing. He'd put it into space, and ton of fun to play with. Real smart hockey player. But yeah, so when I arrived in Germany, you guys were all at the Wasserturm. I don't know if you remember that, like that little place that was a little watering hole for the Adler. And I came in off the plane, and the whole team's there. I didn't know anybody. First time in first hour essentially in Germany, no clue what to expect, and you're all sitting at this table there outside, gorgeous summer day in Mannheim, and all the what types of beers were those there? That
Hefeweizen.
Yeah, Hefeweizen. My first Hefeweizen touched my lips. Oh my gosh, the rest was history. And anyway, so they're all sitting there, and I'm introducing myself, going around the table, and Heinze introduced himself. He's sitting at the end of the table. And I sat down, and I found out that he was actually a player on the team. And I could have sworn that he had to be like the equipment manager or something, or the bus driver.
I remember you saying that. You actually were talking to a couple guys going, "Does this guy really play on the team?" You legitimately thought. And that was, I think he may have overheard you too. And I think you were in his bad books for about a week or something about that. But I do remember that. I remember the look on your face too. You kind of gave her one of these. Really?
It's professional hockey. Yeah. But anyways, we did talk him up. He was a hell of a good hockey player. Just didn't look like
unbelievable. One. Like honestly, like one of the best passers that I've ever played with throughout my entire pro career. Like, I mean, he went over to Europe. I don't know. I think he was a 100-point guy in the WHL as well. Like he had numerous points. Yeah. And like all of us, we just, he didn't enjoy the gym that much more than anyone else, but he still, the way that he could find guys and make plays, he was unbelievable. And played forever too over in Germany, and was one of the best German players on their national team for years as well.
That was a special group. You mean even just even having the opportunity to talk to Chris and establish that friendship with Joe and
Yep.
Mike Rosati, I connected with again on Twitter, and he's now goaltending coach with the Vegas Knights. And like you said, Junks, who's going to come down. And I mean, there's just a bunch of good guys, Anders Miervold and Andy Delmore and Cristobal Huet. And like that one year, Rene Corbet, like, oh my gosh, like it was actually a really special group. And I wish we had a little more success here. We got to the final one year when I was there. And I know, I think you had you won a championship there with them, right?
Yeah, we won the year previously. Then we lost the following year, and then I think we got to the finals and lost again. But those years that we were on the team together, there should have been multiple championships. There's just a couple things here and there that went. But in terms of our team compared to the rest of the league, hands down, we had the best team there for about 4 years in a row. And just that's playoffs. Sometimes things don't happen, but we had a really good team there. And again, as you said, the chemistry in the locker room is what makes a lot of those teams special. And we had characters of every degree in that dressing room. And there wasn't one day that went by that one guy wasn't the target of getting jabbed one day, and then another day it was someone else, and just jokes going around. And the fact that we were in a foreign country in Germany, that everyone had each other's backs in case, you needed to lean on somebody, because being away from home and being in Europe, our family was our team. And we had a lot of imports to lean on. It was pretty cool.
You were central to that, and maybe that's like Bill Stewart just came to my mind, like the Stewie stories. Like we could be here honestly all day, right, with the Stewie stories. And you know what, we got to do that at one point, because I don't remember half of them. I remember the one with me coming back from the concussion. This was a mild one, but like the FU match, he came into the shower. You've been through a concussion now, and that was my first one, and it's the most, it's the worst injury to go through, because there's no bruise. Right? There's no cast. There's nothing obvious that's wrong with you, yet you can't be in a crowd. You don't like loud music. Lights hurt you. You have headaches that no one can tell. And I think you knew me well enough at that point to know that, I'm not a shoot puller, and there's no way in hell that I didn't want to not be on the ice. And he was essentially calling out my character, like again and again and again. And this one time I just finally, out of the shower, I said, went into his office anyways, the FU matches that were famous with Stewie, and and then that's what I wanted to see, like him patting himself on the back that he was, he pulled this good coaching tactic. But anyways, we had so many Stewie stories. But I just told the story the other day. I don't remember if you remember when Helmut Giraffe came in.
Yes, of course.
And so wasn't he the coach of the junior Adler at the time? Yep,
he was the junior Adler, the U20 team. And he came in to coach us.
So he had no previous professional experience. He was the junior 20 coach. And not saying that people have to have their start somewhere, but we were a pretty long in the tooth, let's say, veteran team, right? So to have a coach come in from the junior team, I think he knew kind of what he was getting into, and that he was going to have to try and get some of our respect. And God, that training camp that he held when he first came in there, it was during some break that we would usually have, and we weren't allowed to go anywhere. And it was 2 weeks of absolute hell mid-season. I remember not even be able to walk down.
It was the Deutschland Cup, when you have the Deutschland Cup and your November break, I think it is. Yeah. And that's every year. They schedule the German national team has tournaments amongst a few of the smaller nations in Europe, and our league shuts down. And that's what it was. It was for a week. Our league shuts down, and sometimes they let you go away and come back, but they kept us there. I remember that.
Yeah, and they kept us there 2 days in the whole 9 yards. I was broken by the time that thing was done. Yeah, so we had our fair share of adversity there. But the one thing I want to bring up, because I thought you were really central to that team from the moment I walked into the day I left it, as far as from a team culture perspective and what you brought to the locker room, and just the way that you did it. And one of the things that I've taken with me from that experience, and even use now with the people that I work with, is the idea of the game that you called consequence. And I don't know how, at the time it was more like a team builder, just something that would get a lot of laughs and a lot of jokes, but there is so much psychological benefit to that, in my opinion, for guys, the right guys, to be able to not take yourself seriously, to be able to do that, when every bone in your body is telling you that you shouldn't be doing it, right? That you don't want to be a part of it. Can you explain to those listening what consequence is, and maybe one or two of the top stories of it?
Well, it's one of it's something that that I did when I was in Calgary. It was kind of the same sort of situation as we'd have all these, you always have team dinners, right? And, or you'd go out as a group and stuff. And there'd be times where there's just not a whole lot going on. And you want to try to entertain yourself a little bit with the group. So what we did in Mannheim all the time is we have these things called Cabina Fests, where the Cabina Fest was having dinner after practice in our dressing room. And then afterwards, we would go out to one of the local bars and have drinks with the whole team. And it was kind of a team building situation where everyone got out in a social environment away from the rink and have fun. Or we would go out together as a team for dinner one night, whatever it was. But we'd play a game and we'd have consequences. You could either play it with cards, but I'd like to play it with a piece of paper. And what we do is we would put a number down between 0 and 1,000, and you would go around the table. And the whole object was not to pick the number. Because if you pick the number, hence the name, there would be a consequence attached to it if you pick the number. So what we would do is we would decide before the game started, and we go around the table, guys, is this a fair consequence? And one of the original ones, which is very PG rated, was if you lost the consequence game and we're in a restaurant, you had to go to the men's bathroom and you had to get an 8-foot strand of toilet paper and tuck it into the back of your pants and take it for a couple laps around the restaurant. And you weren't allowed to stop. Even if people were saying, excuse me, sir, you've got toilet paper. You're just supposed to go around like nobody, like you don't even notice, but do a couple laps. So the first couple of times you're doing that and you're just dying because, there's certain guys on the team that, as you said, Jason, hated that. There was no way in God's green earth they were going to embarrass themselves in any capacity. But the guys that always lost these games were the ones that hated it the most, which is why it was so much fun. So you'd go around the table and you'd pick it. The guy would say 500, between 0 and 1,000. 500. Okay, the number was 800, higher. And then guy would say 900. So higher, lower, until eventually you got to that number. And it would go pretty fast, to tell you the truth. So we'd get about 5 or 6 games in every time we were at dinner. And I think one of my favorite ones was, you mentioned the name Mike Rizzotti. He lost one of the games. And the consequence was that we, as a team, got to pick the table at the restaurant of where we wanted him to go. And what he had to do is he had to go to a table where it's just, whether it's 3 people, 2 people, whatever. You had to go and without saying a word, sit down at their table, look at both of them without saying a word, then look at their food that they have on their plate, and then reach in with your hand and grab it and grab a piece of food off of their plate and pop it in your mouth, chew it up, eat it, stand up and walk away without saying anything. And I'm telling you, the look on some of these people's faces that they can't, first of all, who is this guy sitting with me? And second of all, did that really happen that this guy just picked a piece of food off of my plate, ate it, and then left? And I remember Rosie had to do it, and I've never seen a guy like Mike Rizzotti is a shorter, stock Italian guy that really sweats profusely. And when he went and had to go do that, we had to get him a brand new shirt to go out that night because it was wrung out. There was pits everywhere. He was so nervous, but he went and did it. And the whole table just died laughing at it, right? So that was another one. The other one was go to a movie theater and, you'd have to get a big bag of popcorn covered in butter and accidentally trip on a step and throw your popcorn in the air, and it would cover like a whole section of people. There's melted butter on guys' shirts and stuff. People were so pissed off. But like little things like that. But it was always in good fun, never to really go over the line. Sometimes we did, but for the most part, it was an unbelievable team bonding stuff, and guys love doing it. But the best part is when we'd sit down, Potsy, I know you'd say it a bunch of times. You go, can we just have a dinner, to sweat through this, knowing that there's a game of consequence at the end? And Steve Junker was another guy that hated it so much. The minute the word consequence came up or number game, guys just started. They wanted to leave. They didn't want. But the best part, they all stuck through it, and they all did it. At the end of the day, we'd have tons of laughs the next day in the dressing room talking about it.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. It really was. And to see in the guys, and that was the thing. I mean, you get in that environment, like the pure, you had to agree that you were going to do it. And then when there was a big enough group of guys, like even like me, like the odds maker, and I did it with the begrudgingly, but I mean, it always turned out to be a good thing. But it was there's 12 guys here, right? Like, what are the chances? I mean, like, I'm not going to do this, right? And then sure enough, you're the guy who gets the one that you're just dying not to do.
Oh yeah, and the best is when the guy that would get picked, you think, because like there's one guy that does the number, he writes down the number, and the whole thing is the guy that writes the number can get hit too, because you always have to say one number closer, whether it's higher and lower. So we could eventually come down to 2 numbers, and a guy says one, and you have to say one number closer to the actual number, and you get fried. So I remember numerous times guys thought that was a big advantage. And I remember Mike Stevens. Did you play with Mike Stevens, or was he gone by then? Maybe he was gone by then. But that's Scott Stevens' brother. And Mike played 4 years with me. We played this game, and he hated it more than anybody. And Mike was this big, tough, rough guy, like a big bruiser, and he hated this game. And I remember he one night he says, "I'm doing the goddamn number. You always never get a Hlushko." And I go, "Here, feel free." 3 games in a row, Mike drew the number and went to the game, and it came back to him all 3 times that he picked the number and did it. And we were killing ourselves. It couldn't have been more funny that it happened to him 3 times. Needless to say, he never wanted to pick the number.
There you go. Well, I mean, actually, because I brought this home with me too with my buddies, and that's the thing. Everyone assumes that the number, you mean picking the number, you're not going to get it. You actually are twice as likely to get it because you have to go higher or lower of that one number, right? So yeah,
it's a great game.
It's kind of funny. It's not an advantage at all. The one I remember most for me, which wasn't even the worst one, but in one of those like squares, I think we were in Berlin. We did it. We were out walking, I think after pregame skate or whatever, and we had a consequence game. And I had to mime by a fountain with my hat off for like till ever I think I had to get €5 or something.
Yeah, you had to get a tip. I remember that.
So I had to mime.
And the hat was down as your donation bucket.
Right. Yeah, with my hat down as my donation bucket. Oh my God, you guys were just killing yourselves laughing.
A mime. Oh my goodness, that was.
But there was the horrific fall you guys called. It was similar to the movie theater one, but it was in a restaurant. You come out and the one that night was you had to take a piece of furniture had to hit the floor with you, whether it was the table or a chair, but something had to come down. And it was even turned up another notch with the fact that you had to fake an injury until the waitress brought you a bag of ice, and that was the only time you're allowed to leave the floor. Yeah. Oh my God!
You had to sell it. You had to sell. You couldn't pop up. You had to be a WWE actor, and you had to sell the bad knee until someone came and got you. But what you also did is you also added. I remember we added with that horrific fall in a restaurant a bucket of bread. So you'd be walking, you'd have a bucket of bread, and as you took the fall, you would throw the bread in this bucket, and it would land on people's plates everywhere. Because the whole thing was to garner as much attention as you possibly could to your horrific fall, to see how many people would look at you and see if you would get any compassion. And that was the best part. Some people would come over, some people would just ignore you and continue eating, but you had to stay there till someone came to help you up. It was good.
Oh my God! I mean, you got to remember, like there's a table full of hockey players at some point in this restaurant that is pretending to just be a part of it and acknowledge what was going on. Meanwhile, you're like just buckled over laughing. It was really brilliant. And yeah, so for all you young players out there, I think it is a great team builder thing. Obviously, keep it between the lines and keep it fun, but like. It's such a beautiful thing to not take yourself so seriously, because that is one of the biggest things people fear is fear of other people's opinions, right? Mm-hmm. Fear of what people think of you, fear of judgment, like all this stuff. And you talked about earlier with the NHL, and to bring this full circle with hockey, like making mistakes. It's hard to make mistakes because of the consequence, because of how you might be judged, how people think of you. If you can get okay with that, the idea of not being perfect, it actually helps you in so many levels, whether it's on the ice or off the ice. So, I mean, I think that there is some psychology behind that game, and it's a hell of a lot of fun too.
Yep.
So,
100%.
Thank you for that introduction. Anyways, we're at the 90-minute mark, being 100, and I think we should cut Todd loose here. But Lush, thanks so much. I knew you're going to be a ton of fun and a great interview, and it's awesome to see your face and your no neck, and remind me of what a strong man you were there on the ice.
COVID 50 they call it, but I actually hit COVID 100. So time to get in the bike.
Well, you're looking good, bud. Thanks again, and until next time, listeners, play hard, keep your head up. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening today. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end. I really appreciate you spending your time with me and Todd. I know you got a few laughs. You had to have. He makes me smile and he makes me chuckle. Love those stories. Really was never a dull moment in a locker room with Todd Hlushko. If he didn't have a story to share, he was prying one out of you. And he just loved getting all the details from everything that was happening in everyone's days. He really enjoyed it and was really a guy that would stir the pot, and was the first guy to throw a jab and the first guy to laugh at himself. So he was always the life of the dressing room, and one of those personalities that every dressing room needs. So if you had the pleasure of playing with Todd, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm sure those of you who haven't played with him but did play the game can point to an individual that represents what Todd represents, because every dressing room seems to have one of those guys. So lots to learn from Todd. I'm really glad he's doing so well right now in what he's up to with Mannheim. He put in 4 or 5 solid seasons there in Mannheim. The Hop family, which is the ownership group there, was absolutely great to all of us, and I know Todd was a big part of that organization, and now is helping them to create these really quality teams that Mannheim has traditionally been able to put on the ice. So great job to Todd. Great job to what he has going on there. Congratulations on a great career, a hard-fought career, a career that wasn't easy to carve out. Coming from the 12th round and to establish himself all the way up into the NHL is not an easy task. And I know that he has that memory of that Olympic silver medalist that no one can ever take away from him, and rightfully so, because he deserved every ounce of that silver. So anyways, great stories again. Thanks so much for being here. And the big thing I took away from Todd today is just his ability to assess where he was at, and was his ability to be noticed. Right? And that's what all players need to do, whether that is with your compete level specifically, or whether that's with the way you move the puck or the way you score goals. Whatever it is you do, you need to stand out. You need to be able to separate yourself from the crowd. What I love about what Todd was saying, what I've said here for a long time, is that your compete, whether you are a goal scorer or whether you are a great face-off guy or a penalty killer or a half-wall power play guy, your compete is something that you can control every practice and every game. It's tough to control whether your shot goes in all the time or whether that pass makes it through that seam, or whether you win every face-off, but you can control your effort level. Whether it's in the initial one-on-one puck battle or whether it's afterwards and maybe you lost it, what type of effort you show on the back check, how quick you recover and get back out there to be competitive again on your next shift. These are all things that are within your control as a player. I know as a coach it's something that I really value, and it's something that I teach, and I know it's something that scouts look for. So definitely give yourself an honest self-assessment on where your competitiveness lies and how you can get better at that, because I truly believe you can never be too competitive on a sheet of ice. So until next time, play hard. Keep your head up.